Lavender Literary Society members, good evening and welcome to our inaugural book club program. Today, we embark on a voyage through the vivid landscapes of queer history and culture, guided by the vibrant pages of the books we'll spend time with over the course of the months ahead. As we gather in this virtual space, we are not merely readers, but trailblazers, forging connections that transcend time and generations. Our mission is clear: to honor our history, celebrate our present, and pave the way for a future steeped in understanding and unity. Within the covers of our chosen books, we will discover more than stories. We will uncover the essence of resilience, the beauty of our diversity, and the power of solidarity. With each turn of the page, we become architects of change, weaving our experiences into a tapestry of strength and pride. But this book club is more than just words on a page. It's a movement, a force for empowerment, and a testament to the indomitable spirit of the LGBTQ+ community. Together, we will traverse the rich terrain of queer history and memoir, guided by inspiring authors and iconic guest facilitators. So let us not only read, but immerse ourselves in the magic of storytelling as we journey through the narratives that define us, inspire us, and connect us. For in this space, our voices are heard, our stories are celebrated, and our collective spirit shines brightly. Welcome to the American LGBTQ+ Museum Book Club, where every page turned is a step forward in our shared quest for understanding, empathy, pride, and queer liberation. My name is Suhaili Bautista Carolina. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the Director of Public Programs and Partnerships at the American LGBTQ+ Museum. I'm going to do a bit of a visual description. I am a brown-skinned woman wearing purple lipstick, pom-pom earrings, a striped blouse, and I'm wearing my curly hair in a high bun. The American LGBTQ+ Museum is a new collaboration dedicated to preserving, researching, and sharing LGBTQ+ history and culture that will open its first galleries in New York City in 2027. However, we like to say that you don't have to wait that long to experience the queer magic of the American LGBTQ+ Museum. In fact, you're experiencing it right now. We're already producing and presenting dynamic public programming, as well as traveling exhibitions centered on LGBTQ+ history and culture. And I encourage you to check us out, follow us on social media, become a founding member, attend a program, and stay engaged as our story continues to unfold. Before we begin, I'd like to share a virtual land acknowledgement. While we are gathered in a virtual space today, we are each tuning in from our respective Indigenous lands. I myself am joining you from present-day Brooklyn, New York City, the unceded homeland of the Lenape people. We respect the diverse Indigenous peoples connected to the territories on which we reside and gather, and honor the energy and stewardship of these lands by all Indigenous generations, past, present, and future. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our debut author, my friend Raquel Willis. As an activist, public speaker, and journalist for more than a decade, Raquel Willis's powerful voice has shed light on the unique struggles faced by trans women of color. From grassroots organizing in Atlanta, to challenging police profiling and mass incarceration, to leading the Atlanta Trans Liberation Tuesday mobilization with Black Lives Matter, Raquel's dedication to advocacy for Black folks is unwavering. Among many projects and award-winning publications, Raquel also created the Black Trans Circles to address anti-trans violence, focusing on developing the leadership of Black trans women in the South and Midwest by creating healing justice spaces. Additionally, Raquel continues to use her platform to fundraise for Black-led LGBTQ+ initiatives and to champion campaigns for Black and LGBTQ+ communities. And we're so happy to welcome our inaugural and fabulous host, B. Hawk Snipes. B. Hawk Snipes is an entrepreneur, award-winning social activist, non-binary ballroom trailblazer, music artist, entertainer, and model, as you will see, from the Bronx, New York. They're on a mission to conjure honest and captivating projects to explore diversity within the arts through a Black, queer, and trans lens. She is also one of the board members for the BFTA Collective, which helps Black trans femmes succeed in the arts. If you would like to know more, Google them. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Raquel and B to the virtual stage. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Suhaili, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to the American LGBTQ plus Museum. It's so exciting to be a part of this series and the work happening with the Lavender Literary Society ahead of obviously this major moment with the opening of the museum. So thank you. And thank you, B Hawk, for joining me tonight. We finally get to be in conversation. So I'll start with a reading, and then B Hawk is going to take the reins, honey. So I can't wait. So this reading is an excerpt from a very pivotal chapter in my memoir, The Risk It Takes to Bloom, on life and liberation. We're jumping kind of into the deep end right away. I write a letter to my father, who is, as my family is just finding out, passing away. And it's very unexpected. So I start off the scene with my siblings, my older sister, Jessica, and my older brother, Chet. So here we go. Jessica, Chet, and I drove to the hospital under an overcast sky. For the first time ever, my siblings opted not to have the radio on, and a gnawing silence filled the space between us. As familiar thoroughfares whirred past, I realized I might never see my hometown the same way again. My trips back had already grown fewer and further apart as I entered my sophomore year at the University of Georgia. I was evolving, feeling less obligated to step back into this environment. And now I felt guilty. How many precious moments with you, my father, had I surrendered? My trance ended when we walked into the intensive care unit waiting area. Mama, Auntie Robin, and her husband, Uncle Gary, were gathered together with the same solemn expressions that Jessica and Chet had earlier. Either they were collecting their emotions for our sake, or else they were cloaked in denial. Mama was surprisingly calm, ever the voice of reason during otherwise freak-out worthy moments. She never panicked whenever I hurt myself while pulling some ridiculous stunt as a kid. Remember when I somersaulted off a moving golf cart after a yellow jacket stung me, and I shredded the flesh of my right middle finger on the pavement? She didn't even wince when the doctor injected a local anesthetic, smoothed my brown skin back over the digit, and sutured it. It almost made me wonder if she was worried at all. As I matured, I realized she buried her feelings to keep the rest of us at ease in true matriarchal fashion. That's a Black mother for you, concerned with how everyone else felt, even though the love of her life was on his deathbed. We all exchanged deep hugs with Auntie and Uncle. You know your sister. She's on the exact opposite end of the keep it together spectrum as Mama. It seemed like her face could crack at any moment, and a river of anguish and sadness would gush out. She had a reputation for not accepting death like most folks. Decades later, she would tear up at the slightest mention of Grandma Novella. Uncle was stoic as ever. The concern was there on his face, but he heeded the call of masculinity well, like Chet. You wouldn't see either of them crying in front of the rest of us if they allowed themselves to show emotion at all. Unlike Mama's selfless stoicism, Theirs seemed more about self-preservation. Soon, your children paced into the hospital room, where your body lay unresponsive. The respirator was methodically cycling air through your lungs. Jessica, ever fearless, led the way in greeting you. She kissed your forehead and caressed your face, longing for a response. My sister seemingly never stifled how she felt. I admired and envied the freedom she had to emote, while I was expected to encase myself within a hardened exterior. As Chet took his turn, he just looked on, muting his shock. Maybe it was because I was there looking on. Would it have been different for him without an audience? After Jessica and Chet left, I lingered. You were dying. I'd never seen you so helpless, silent, vulnerable, and weak. How could I hold on to the unfairness of all of this? I couldn't adhere to gender rules right now. You're my dad. During my grade school years, you were the one who overcooked my dinner sometimes, but made it out of love. I had no more gripes about your insistence on shaking my hand versus hugging me, or how you listened to the radio so loud that my earphones never stood a chance at blocking out the sound. You did your best to raise me to survive, even though you didn't fully understand who I was destined to be. All those moments when we had disagreed mattered less as I held your left hand analyzing it. Those long, slender brown fingers that had baited my hooks on fishing trips, pumped up flat tires on my bike, and fixed collars on my dress shirts. Your hands look so much like mine, albeit older and rougher. And it was one of the few times I noticed your fingers at all. Usually you had on some ornate ring or at least your golden wedding band, but nurses had collected those things in a small plastic bag per hospital custom. All the things you adorned yourself with mattered much less now. As your chest rose artificially and fell naturally, I imagined that you were just in an eerie, deep slumber. You were only 57 and seemed spry and healthy. Even now, your face gracefully betrayed your age. It was the same complexion as mine, but bespeckled with moles of various sizes. Your visage was far from anything I would have expected at your death. Maybe you'd have a full head of gray hair and your forehead would be more wrinkled. You definitely still have your signature scowl. It was something we shared with Grandma Inez. Y'all called it the Willis face, but I've learned that the rest of the world simply calls it resting bitch face. And I proudly claim my legacy. Soon, our priest arrived to perform your last rites. With his skeletal frame and sunken eyes, I would have thought that he was more shocked by your sudden death than us. When he walked over, I shook his hand firmly and looked at him with direct eye contact, just like you had taught me. He'd raced to the hospital after the day's services to pay his respects. Then, after a glance at you, he summoned us. Now a constellation, including distant relatives and family friends, to gather around your hospital bed and hold hands. Relaying a standard prayer in his thick Irish accent, the priest sprinkled in unique details about your life and presence in our community. Finally, he asked the room if anyone else would like to speak. A few people did, but Mama drew the tears out of us. I never would have imagined this, she exclaimed, gripping your hand. Then she flailed as if all the energy was leaving her body, releasing the dreams y'all undoubtedly had together. You've been married for over 33 years. How could she anticipate your premature death? In fact, It wasn't until you were in the hospital that I ever considered y'all's future or mortality. The assumption was that you'd both grow old together. As 50 somethings you were, it seemed, only halfway through your lives. And selfishly, I had only thought about your future in terms of my own milestones. Grandma Inez's reaction pulled on my heartstrings as well. Just a few days before, she had sworn she wouldn't bury her child, but we learned that fate rarely acquiesces to those assertions. She couldn't handle seeing you on your deathbed and refused to be present. With few words, she listened to the prayer over the phone. I know y'all didn't always see eye to eye, and that your muted affection toward each other was mostly translated through laughter and wit, but your departure broke her. After everyone said their goodbyes to your living presence, the doctor halted the ventilator. As your chest settled, the doctor looked at his watch, ready to record your time of death. I hoped for a miracle in those nanoseconds, like in all those movies I had seen growing up. Maybe you would pop up, open your eyes, and be with us again. As you took your last breath, your body jerked up violently, startling all of us, but it was inconsequential. The final jolt of energy from a body that had operated for over half a century. All it took for a few seconds, all it took was a few seconds for another human to seal the moment of your life. I had felt your presence for so long that I instantly knew what it felt like to be without it. Skipping ahead here a little bit. When I returned to campus, I figured a few days of classes before the funeral would be my refuge. But I was destined to do serious reflection instead. The night I returned, it stormed. The media dubbed it snowpocalypse because it was Georgia's first major blizzard in nearly a decade. Accidents ensued, flights were canceled, and my classes were postponed. There would be nothing to distract me from the grief. I didn't have the energy to unpack my suitcases, so I pushed them aside and collapsed on my twin-sized bed. Was it selfish to leave my family at a time like this? I was in and out of a hazy stupor for an indeterminate amount of time. Minutes and hours flooded together. I couldn't even trust the sun because of the endless glow of the frost. It had to be daytime when my friends texted me to come out and play in the snow, but I just lay still. Any other time, I would have relished the rare treat of winter weather in my home state, but none of that mattered now. Would I ever love snow again? Would joy ever take the place of this void in my heart? Now and then, I'd scarf down some of the basil tomato soup that Isabel's mother, my best friend from high school, told her to share with me. It was all I could do to keep it down, along with toast, heavily buttered in true Southern fashion. Since the dining halls were closed due to the weather, I appreciated the gesture of care. I felt hopeless and alone, like something in me had died with you. In between creating Facebook posts trying to commemorate you, all I could do was reflect on how unbelievable it was that I was now fatherless. I was only 19. You hadn't seen me accomplish anything. I envied my brother and sister. At least you'd seen them become their own people. But what most hurt was that deep down, I didn't know if I ever could have done enough to prove my validity to you. I wasn't on track to have a neat, acceptable, palatable life. In my dorm room, I spent a lot of time looking in the mirror, searching for answers. I observed my prickly chin and volatile acne. I may not have looked the way I wanted, but I was determined to get closer to my fantasy. I threw on a random playlist featuring my current faves, Nicki Minaj and Rihanna, but some I shared with you, like Etta James and Prince. Then I soothed myself by playing in dollar store makeup, an oily foundation that was nowhere near my shade, bloody, easily smeared lipstick, and grainy mascara. I accepted that this wasn't just a therapeutic thing for me. While a part of me was trying to conceal the feelings of pain, loss, and anguish at that moment, another part was trying to carve out who I'd become in a world where your approval mattered less. Slowly, those gendered expectations you instilled in me melted away, and the woman inside me was bubbling to the surface. Your death saddened me, but it also freed me. I could love you and not fit your mold. I could love you and I didn't have to see myself as a failure for not being the epitome of Black masculinity. I could love you and I didn't have to surrender my brief, precious life to your dreams. Sincerely, the child formerly known as your son.
Thank you, Raquel. Thank you. Whew. So with that, I want to just take a moment to take a couple inhales and exhales to bring our ancestors into this room, um, the marvelous folks that have been mentioned in this marvelous book into this space as well. So if we can collectively just put our hands over our chests and close our eyes. I'm gonna inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. One more time, inhale, exhale. Ashe, amen, afem, all of those things. Thank you, my transipster from another transmister, Raquel Willis, everyone. Yes, let's get into. By the way, I'm Behawk Snipes. Pronouns they, them, and she, her. Your host with the most here today, joining my sister. But I really want to get into the fits and let people know what we're giving, because it's giving. What's it giving? What's it giving? So I am wearing a olive green, forest green silk scarf around my head. I am it's giving winter going into spring, so I'm like a light-skinned melanated individual right now, but you know that shape will change once the summer kicks in. It's giving platinum blonde hair for the girls that get it, a 613. And I am wearing a forest and olive green dress with gold accessories. Raquel, what's it giving over there?
It is giving, brown skin girl. I got a base tan recently, so the melanin is coming back out for the season. I'm wearing some Alexis Batar like earrings and some little studs too. And then I have like a scarf that is like it's purple, it's violet, it's as close to lavender as I can get. Most of my lavender stuff I feel like is very wintry, so this is my little like scarf shawl moment. And then the hair is slick back. Slick back Monday.
Oh, it's very Sade-esque. It's giving royal. It's giving glamour. I mean, she brings it every ball, so I don't know if anyone's surprised or not. Um, but I'm so happy to share this space with you. This is a full circle moment. This is a moment that everyone has been waiting for. The anticipation is here. It is now. So I'm just really, really excited to share this space with you. Especially as someone who's, born and raised in New York. I lived in Atlanta for a little bit.
I
GA.
didn't know that.
Surprise. Yes, I lived in I tried to go down to the South and switch it up. I lived in Georgia for a year.
Okay.
That's all I could do. That's all I could do. But I thank you for your work in Georgia, where your birthplace, holding it down. And so before we even get into the identity of Raquel Willis, I want to do some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Let's relax. It's giving tea talk today. Um, so let's start it off with. Okay, so I'm drinking water. I don't have my tea. It's kind of warm here in New York. um, so favorite color.
Favorite color. Ooh, this is hard. I was one of those kids that always said rainbow.
Uh, that tells a story.
So it was
Let's
giving
even spin
queer.
the wheel. Pick one.
Spin the wheel and pick one. I'm a Gemini. These decisions. Okay, we'll say purple, lavender. Why
Let's,
not?
let's do it. Let's do it. Okay. Womanist. It's the feminist. As purple. It's the lavender. Let's go. Come
Yeah.
on. Walker, we thank you. Favorite zodiac sign. And you can't say Gemini.
I can't say Gemini. Ooh.
No.
Scorpios are growing on me right now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You know, you know.
If you know, you know. Ooh. Favorite person you follow on social media.
Favorite person that I follow on social media. Ooh.
It gotta be the first person you think of.
I'm gonna say Viandre Mitchell.
Yeah, that's a good
'Cause
one.
she's, one of the upcoming legendary children, and I got to be in conversation with her for LA's book talk, so she's amazing.
She's that girl.
Mm.
Favorite TV show.
Oh, all-time faves, My So-Called Life and Ugly Betty.
Ooh, that's a good
But there
mix.
are others for sure.
So many. So
Mhm.
many. Which you also named in the book. So get the book if you want to know more. Fave movie.
Fave movie. Um, I was saying this earlier. Beyond the Lights. I really like Beyond the Lights. It's like the
Okay.
black bodyguard, like fully black. No shade to Whitney, but black
If you
love
know.
interest bodyguard.
Right.
Yeah, we'll say that.
It's a good one. What's the last book you read outside of your own? Because you just read your own.
Oh, it is there is so funny. There are like different categories of books that I read, but for like research or a blurb. So this was for a blurb
Mhm.
for Nico Lang, amazing LGBTQ plus journalist, has a forthcoming book coming out about transgender teens in
Mm.
around the US, and it's called American Teenager.
Ooh. Gotta get into that. Okay.
Mm.
What is the last song you listened to?
Oh, that's hard. I'm gonna say On My Body by Tyla featuring
Oh,
Becky G.
I had a feeling you were gonna say Tyler. I had a feeling.
Tyla is like that EP. I'm in a chokehold right now.
She's growing on me. It took me some time. She's growing on
Mm-hmm.
me. It's growing on me. Cats or dogs?
Probably dogs. I think the point of like access is just lower with dogs.
So too. I agree. That's why I'm a dog person. I ain't got time. Okay. Favorite food?
Mm. What's coming to me is okay. It's very specific.
A Southern girl. Come on.
It is, but it's like, okay, so like in the South, you have the Sunday, and so like the options on Sunday are a bunch of different things, but key things are like this, that's the fried chicken dinner night.
Mm.
Or it could be every now and then my mom would do fried pork chops.
Ooh.
And now with the fried pork chop, the next day it's even better. And then you put it in a sandwich
Sandwich with the
with
oh.
lettuce and a bunch of mayo. I would probably throw in a tomato now because tomatoes had to grow on me as I got older.
Okay, come on, tomato.
That was it. That was it.
Okay. Wow. If you know, you know. With an orange drink? No.
Oh,
What's your
orange drink.
J-Lo? My God.
The crushes.
Um,
Yes.
who's who's your celebrity crush at the moment?
Oh, there we go. Crushes.
On Pan's Paradise.
One Day in Paradise.
It's you are a member of Pansexual Paradise. So
I am a member of Pansexual Paradise. Oh, I mean crushes.
just name
Ooh, so
one. The first one that
that
pops in.
that means I'm have to give a range.
Oh
Um,
well,
oh, that's hard.
we would love
Celebrity.
to hear it.
I mean, look, Janelle will always have a place in my heart, honey. Janelle Monáe, who blurbed the book. Shout out to my boo.
Y'all
I
share the stage
don't
too.
know. You said what?
Didn't y'all share you was on stage with Janelle last year?
Yes, with Megan the Stallion, another crush.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. Living you are living the life. You are living the life.
It was a moment for sure. It was they were doing the hottie twerk
I
off.
saw. I was like, oh, this is a different side of her I've never seen before. Work. I was here for it. I
We
was
gotta
here for it.
play at that pedestal every now and then.
It was so good. But yeah, that's all the rapid fire questions I have for you.
Okay.
I just want to switch things up. I've never seen it done. I've been to two of your talks and I've never seen anyone do it. So I was like, let's switch it up here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into this one right here. One right here. And also the cover. Shout out to BTFA Studios. Thank you.
Yes. So the cover was shot at Black Trans Femmes in the Art Studio in Brooklyn by Texas Isaiah.
Woo.
Amazing, iconic Vogue cover shooting Black trans photographer. He actually has a show out right now in LA. So if you're out there, look it up.
Tap
And
onto
shout out
that.
to Jordan J. Shout out to you, everyone who makes BTFA possible. Like, yes, thank you.
Yeah. The ride, the journey. And we're just, I think all of us have just been so touched and inspired by your journey and your words. Like it literally inspires so many of us to continue to push forward in our greatness.
Mhm.
Because being Black, being queer, being trans, and being all those intersections of things across the spectrum is so challenging. So it
Mhm.
feels good to know that there's some sort of representation out there, especially nowadays, because a lot of us didn't have that growing up. It feels so great to know that we have someone, amongst our peer group that has also gone through challenges and so many other things and is still raising the bar and pushing forward in their greatness. So, we all inspire each other, which is so beautiful to see in real time. But one of the ones, you are
Thank
one of the chosen ones. And I'm just, once again, cannot wait to tell my children.
Hmm.
Yeah, I knew Raquel Willis. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, thank
We go way
you.
back. I got the book. She signed it. Yes.
Yeah.
So we're just so thankful for you. But my first question is, I really want to really get into identity and the core of Raquel Willis. Um, I know that a lot of people, have poured into you as they should and given you your flowers in real time because you have such an impressive career. Um, was that one of the reasons you was like, listen, and you also do a lot of historical work, right? And I think to me, it felt like, okay, this made sense for her to sit down and let me tell my story. Not, I don't want anyone else telling my story. If I do so pass one day, or when I pass one day on to the next life, um, what were your thoughts around creating and writing and putting pen to paper for this book?
Wow. Definitely at the core of my work is trans folks, and particularly Black trans folks, as the main character of our own stories, not the accessories to anybody else or the accessories to anybody else's political agenda. Ding, ding, ding. During an election year, think about it. What Beyonce say during homecoming? Think about it. Um, so yeah, so that was always at the core. My first thoughts on even having a story came as a kid. Like, I was so isolated growing up in Augusta, Georgia, in a very traditional Southern household, very Catholic household, and then being Black and having all of these expectations from this middle class background of like continuing the march forward to uplift, right? Which I think is something that follows a lot of us of um who are descendants of enslaved Black folks, right? It's like we have to continue this march of like progress. But I also knew that my story was one that in some ways was marred being different. I obviously didn't know I was queer. I just knew I had crushes on boys and I was called effeminate and a sissy and all these things. And so something was up and something was wrong with this emerging story that was coming into fruition. But I knew I had a story to tell, and I had a feeling of dread and fear that I was not going to be able to hold on to the secret of this truth forever. Like, I knew at some point the lid was gonna have to pop off the kettle. I didn't know when, but it was happening. So by the time I got to college, and I had come out as gay at 14, and then in college came into understanding my transness, there weren't many stories to bounce off of at that time. I mean, all I knew of in my kind of crash course on transness, self-directed, first of all, because we weren't really learning much of that at all. Even in the LGBTQ plus course that I took in college, there were only so many texts, and really the main text was like Paris is Burning, a film, and there wasn't a lot of scholarly stuff. There was Julia Serrano, Whipping Girl, which gave me an understanding of trans misogyny, so shout out to her. But she also wasn't of color, so there was a gap. It was like I was cobbling together, white trans scholarship and then like Black cis feminist theory to figure out where I was. Um, and I knew that there was a story there that needed to be told as a Black trans woman in particular. When I graduated, and then I'll wrap this up because I know I'm going on long. But this is like the roots of this idea of feeling like I had a story.
Right.
I graduated in May of 2013. So that was 2 months before Orange is the New Black premiered. So we weren't even close to what we started to consider the trans visibility era. And I had, you know, started my medical transition, and had all my documents changed over so that I could even try and have a journalism career. And I started out stealth in my first job, which you hear more about in the book. And then that was several months before Janet Mock released, obviously, her game changing first memoir, Redefining Realness. So in that time period, I did start to have a sense of like, I wish I had more stories. And luckily those started to come in, but it took a while. So those were kind of the roots.
Mm.
Fast forward to 2020. We're kind of in this new era. I feel like the waning years of the trans visibility era. I had a career now and a bit of a platform, laid off from Out Magazine, which you also hear about in the book. And so I had
Just,
space to bring
sorry.
together the story. Um, so yeah, so that's my long answer about some of these seeds that throughout my life were planted for me to then create The Risk It Takes to Bloom.
We are so thankful because I've read the book and then I listened to the audio version. Okay, we love to hear it when we can. Oh yes. Um, I think listening to it with your voice and your expressions really woke it up. And really brought the pages in a sense to life. Um, and then there were so many parallels to, even though I was born in New York, you were born in Georgia, there's so many like parallels and sense of, representation there. And I was just like, wow, like, there's that Butch Queen phase that we both kind of went through, and then there's that gender non-conforming moment, and then realizing like, oh, I'm trans and things of that nature. Really truly touched me in a way that I didn't think it would.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there were moments where I just felt like I felt so joyous and I felt so happy that you were fully telling so many intricate details of your story, to help others and inspire others to live unapologetically. Um, and speaking of joy, were there any moments that come to mind that when you were writing this book that you experienced? Like, what's the first moment that you can think of when you were like, this is bringing me so much joy and sense of healing currently?
Joy. Um, well, I think definitely the first chapter, right? Like that first half of the chapter and how I'm kind of painting, and that came later. That whole first half of the book came later. Um, because initially the book was largely more about my career and coming into a commitment to social justice, right? More of the liberation part of the on life and liberation piece. And so the second part of the first part of the book and that first chapter, I was like, oh, well, who was I before I felt different?
Mm.
What was kind of that, as authors say, that kind of normalcy before everything kind of shifts. And it was so beautiful to recount innocence and a time before I felt like anything other than just like a human being, and that I was just like a loved kid by my family, and that I wasn't saddled, I think, with the baggage that society had given me. And I think realizing and writing that and the love I have for that part of me, it pushed me to have more love for the different versions of me in between, right? The awkward versions of me as a teenager, the versions of me before transition, and even during kind of the early parts of my transition where everything is about a sprint, or at least it used to be. Like
Yeah.
when I was starting my transition in a decade or so ago, over a decade now, it was, how can I sprint as far away as possible
Mm.
from this version of myself so that nobody can weaponize my being assigned male at birth, right? Or having lived part of my life being called a boy, right? Or seen as a gay boy, you know, like all of those things. And now in 2024, I get to embrace all of those things and demand respect and honor and dignity for the woman I know myself to be. And that gave me joy.
Mm, that is so beautiful. Like, it's really the journey, truly, for me. Like, and reading and listening to your journey was so transcendent. Uh,
Mm,
and a lot of people, especially cis people, don't get the opportunity to live a life otherwise and
mm,
live many lives in a sense, you know, like the evolution for us to be these different alterations of ourselves. In a sense, I always compare us to Pokemon, which probably maybe problematic to some. But I love it. I love Pokemon. I think Pokemon are fab. So I always think it's just about like how these Pokemon are truly, and I'm also a geek. These Pokemon are truly themselves at their core, always in a sense, but they're constantly evolving,
mhm,
and learning and figuring out life as as they evolve and go through it. And it's just been it was just beautiful to see you really come up with this title that is so perfect. The risk it takes to bloom, because you went through so many hurdles, you went through so many things, and you're still going through them, I'm sure. And you're still blooming. And I'm always in awe. Every time I see you, I'm just like, wow. But I know an audience member here stated the role of your mother and sister in your development as a child and later as they support your transition is so very important to all. They love you no matter. This is not every queer person's experience.
mhm.
And it truly isn't, um, unfortunately, right? But for you to talk about the ins and outs of that and those experiences, even though, the missteps that you have with your family and your sister and your mother, to find a sense of joy at the end of that. And I've met your family members, and I'm just like, they're just so beautiful. Your sister, you know, the one of the ones. Um, I really want to talk, really diving into the family part. What lessons have you learned or have you taken, from your mother that still guides you in your life currently?
Mm. Well, I want to circle back and then I'm going to come back to this, but to something you were saying about cis folks and not having their poke evolution. Is that what it's
Okay.
called?
Pokemon evolution, right.
Pokemon evolution. It's interesting because I actually think they have the capacity to,
Mm,
right? It doesn't mean that everyone is trans, but we all have the opportunity to move beyond rigid ideas of who we're supposed to be and society and everyone else's
in the
expectations, right?
binary.
The
Mm-hmm.
thing that's a part of our sacredness as trans and non-binary folks and GNC folks is that oftentimes our bubble, this idea that like the scripts that society gives us will serve us in the long term, that bubble bursts, right? And we're kind of forced to imagine a different version, right? Many of us are. We lose people along the way, right? Who, when the bubble bursts, they're gone, right? And we don't have them anymore. I think a lot of cis people just never get to a point where the bubble bursts enough for them to feel like they're pushed to imagine beyond, right?
Mm,
In some ways, they just kind of get to, wallow in complacency and in the status quo, and they can make it, but they won't ever get to be the better version of themselves that they could be, right? And I think that again, that's part of our like sacredness, and maybe that's a part of like the kind of ancestral indigenous qualities, right? Thinking about different cultures around the world who saw the sacredness in those who were non-binary in some way, or transcended or defied gender in some way.
mm,
But that's just my kind of thing. Going back to the family piece, I also think it's important to, when I think about my mom and my sister as consistent kind of safe havens for me,
mm,
and it has not been completely smooth, which you'll read about in the book. We have had our moments too, but the barrier for them to receive me definitely wasn't as high as it was for the men and masculine folks who have been a part of my life, particularly my dad and my brother. Um, and I think it was important to include those stories because you're right, audience member, that a lot of queer folks don't have the experience of having an origin family that um, receives them or is even on a path to evolve pokey evolution into a family that can receive them, right? Or a person that can receive them. And so that felt important to include what might be possible for cis people to receive a different kind of narrative about um, how they can love.
mm,
So that felt important. I think one of the biggest things I've learned in this process is grace, um, for not just myself and the previous versions of me that have existed and the version of me that didn't know any better, but also I think my family and the versions of them that didn't know any better,
mm,
because like none of us had access to understanding the complexity of gender or identity or sexual orientation, and that's not to brush away accountability, right? Because
right.
you don't have to harm people through your ignorance. Um, but it does help put things in perspective, that there's a grace that we have to give ourselves that mirrors the grace hopefully we can extend to the folks around us who aren't quite there yet.
Mm. No, absolutely. And you spoke in the beginning and read about your father's passing. Um, and I know that in a sense was a release for you, and a way to also honor him and have a sense of grace. Um,
Mhm.
so my question to you is, what is something um, that still holds dear to your heart currently, um, about your father in
Mm,
total?
yeah. So talking about my dad, and figuring out how to talk about the complexity of like the mourning and grief of his death and his passing, and
Mhm,
also release, as you said, of his expectations, has been difficult. Like it was really difficult because I wanted to make sure that there was nuance there, that people understood also the grace that I'm giving my father, right? That, you know, it, he loved me in a way that our society told him was the way he was supposed to love me, right? And a lot of the love that he had for me showed up in terms of trying to protect me, from having a more difficult path, you know, as a queer person, as a person who was gender nonconforming. And also there's baggage and there's trauma there, right? And there was a barrier there for me to be myself. And I think about, you know, his passing, you know, if any of y'all are Marvel heads, I'm a little bit of a Marvel head. And the Into the Spider-Verse kind of series, right? Which is I think the best thing that Marvel has ever done is that whole Miles Morales storyline in those movies. And I'm so excited for the last one. But there's this idea of like canon events, right? So like for Spider-Man and most versions of Spider-Man, there is this idea of he has to have some kind of loss, whether it's the aunt in some versions or his father or whatever, to then become Spider-Man, right? And I think of like my father's death in a way as like I would not be the person I am, which is weird to say, right? I would not be the trans woman that I am without having experienced the hardship of that grief. And with that, I will always kind of wonder, well, what would my life have been if I didn't experience that, right? And if my dad was still here, would he have evolved like my mom, you know, and my sister and brother to understand me? And I don't know, right? I kind of live with that unknown, and I will for the rest of my life. But um, I that's one of the biggest moments of, I guess, risk, right? Is imagining who I could be on the other side of that, right? Like that's a part of that whole the risk it takes to bloom metaphor is like, what is the risk I'm going to take? Am I going to wallow in that grief or imagine something else? And I think that that's a queer allegory because are we going to wallow in these expectations that we're always a failure of in the cis heteropatriarchy, or are we going to bloom and imagine something else, right? And I think that that's universal. Like I think cis and straight people too, we all have these moments where it's like, well, maybe you don't want the job or occupation that your family wanted you to have, right? Or maybe you don't want to have children, or you can't have biological children, or maybe you won't get married and you don't want anybody in your house like Whoopi Goldberg says, right?
Okay, come on now. It
So
ain't for
they
everybody.
so then take the risk to bloom into something else. And I hope folks can take away that universal kind of metaphor.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think they have. I know I have. I'll speak for myself. I'll speak for myself. I know I have amongst so many other gifts. One of the gifts that stood out to me was the one and only Rebel DeVoe. Um, because my sister was once living it up in
Yes,
Drag Race T.
drag history.
Okay, I said, hold on now, hold up the lights.
I know. You know, so many of our folks have been shocked by that.
And it's you know what it is. I think, of course, people that have known you for a long trajectory of your life are probably not. But I first discovered Raquel Willis when you were out. And so this is fast forward. So when I was reading, I was like, wait, hold on now, come on, up in drags, work. And the
Yeah.
name is fab. The name is great.
We all have our first time.
We all have our first time up in pumps, up in a
Mhm.
drag moment. And I was also growing up, I think for a lot of us, all we really truly had that was something outside of the cis binary that was fab was RuPaul in a sense. And as problematic as Ru can be, still to this day, I do give flowers to Rue, because it was the first person I saw that looked like me, that in a sense carried themselves in a way that I wanted to carry myself. So I was happy that you also kind of like spoke a little bit about that in the book. You do a lot of name dropping and a lot of giving flowers, and I love that about you because
Okay.
it really helps someone like me who does a lot of curating work and trying to dive. I'm not trying to. I am diving more into queer and trans history. I pull from your work, and so I thank you for name dropping and giving people their flowers in real time. um Someone by the as you know, Tourmaline, I'm working with her now, and so
Yes.
I'm like, hold on now.
Tourmaline is someone who inspired me, right? Like my Black
Yeah.
trans history kind of desires and love really comes from people like Tourmaline and Monica Roberts. Like I would say those are the two people who have probably been the most influential on me in terms of reclaiming our history.
Mhm. No, I love that. I feel like mine would probably be like, probably RuPaul and like Laverne.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
With a sprinkle of like Lenny Kravitz, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Um, who's not trans, but it's giving androgyny. You get the point.
Yeah, I got you.
Um, and I really want to just speak a little bit more on um your your college life. There was so much to unpack there. There's a lot
That
going
could
on.
have been its own book, honestly. Like
Listen,
that needs to be its own miniseries as just the college years.
we need it. We need it. Um, and I was just like, y'all really, because we're gonna step into some Q&A. Um, but you know, depending on who's coming up with the Q&A right now, we will get back to the college years,
Mm.
soon, because that GNC, that up and drags, the T for T, there's a
Yeah.
lot going on. There's a lot going on there. But let's get into some audience questions. We have our first question is from Sophie, who
Mhm.
uses they and she pronouns. Which chapter did you find the most challenging to write? And was there one that you found the easiest to write?
Mm. Whew. Okay, the most challenging to write was definitely the letter to my father.
Mm,
So yeah, get into that, and then reading that to my mom, and reading it for the first time publicly in front of my mom about a month and a half ago. Yeah, that was hard. The easiest to write, I want to say there was no easy chapter to write. Um, Probably there's one called The Labyrinth of Desire,
mm,
and that one was easy because I had written, and it was the last chapter I added into the book in terms of order. And it's not it is in the like almost smack dab in the middle. It's almost kind of the bridge between this journey mostly focused on my identity, and this journey into me thinking about the bigger implications of society standards, right? And it's about this hookup with this guy, or would be hookup with this guy, and a threat on my life, and all of this. You get a little bit of like the complexities of dating as a Black trans woman in there. But that was easy only because when it happened, it felt I needed such a release that I basically wrote that chapter. And
mhm.
then I realized later on in the process, I was like, I gotta add this in because and tweak it a bit and give folks the real truth, right? Like I don't have this kind of fairy tale like experience, and I don't think most people do. I don't think they most people ever have, to be quite frank. But I think it is particularly revolutionary for me as a Black trans woman to say that it's some ain't shit men out here.
Okay, come on. As much as social
Just
media,
men, but that was, you know, what I focus on here.
much as social media like has most people believe that they live perfect lives.
Mm-hmm.
Be careful with that. Gotta be careful with those ones. It's giving false advertisement. But our second question is, given your experience as an editor-in-chief at Out and the stories you so passionately wanted to tell, what is your current view of trans presence in queer and mainstream media?
Mm.
That was one of my questions, and they took it. So go ahead. Thank you for that question.
Trans presence. I think it's a mixed bag. I think in general, our media landscape is a mess. You know, our mainstream media and niche media is attacking us on all sides, right? You know, the newspaper of record, the New York Times, consistently fucks over the trans community. I think I can curse on here. I'm gonna just go for it. Um, and consistently elevates anti-trans rhetoric, anti-science rhetoric, as much as people want to say that trans people are allergic to science and are living in delusion, honey. You got to be a bit of a scientist to know what certain hormones can do to the body in
Mm-hmm.
certain doses, and on and on. So so I think that we have a huge media problem where there's an outsized emphasis on anti-trans voices and cis people's fears and anxieties around trans people's experiences versus actual authentic trans stories. I saw today on, I haven't seen the full interview and I don't even know when I'll be able to stomach to watch it, but Flame Monroe on, who is a black trans comedian. Um, Sometimes she embraces being trans, other times not. But most times she is not invested in trans liberation. Um, she was being interviewed on The Breakfast Club. I don't even know. It was about something. But I use this as an example of, you know, as a black trans woman, I'm not only facing the issues in in mainstream media like the New York Times and Fox News, but I'm also facing niche media that overwhelmingly impacts our day-to-day lives in the black community, and that includes shows like The Breakfast Club that has for over a decade, almost 2 decades at this point, consistently been on the wrong side of authentic trans narratives and has chosen to platform Flames Monroe. I believe there was a tally under Gay Magazine's Instagram account, GAYE, that Flame Monroe, who has openly called it, she's basically the black Caitlyn Jenner.
Come on. Call it like it is. Right.
With her takes, has been platformed on the Breakfast Club 5 times. And they've had Laverne on there once, Laverne Cox, our icon, Janet Mock on there once, and T.S. Madison
Yeah, she was on there.
once. I believe they had Sydney Starr in there way back in like 2012, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know that they had a trans attracted panel with our good sis Nala Simone, but in Carmen Carrera and Malik Yoba, right? But it was still kind of filtered through a cis man's fantasy around trans experiences. So I say all that to say that our media landscape is shitty, but I think that trans folks are finding our own ways to have our voices told independently. You know, there are trans folks who are on Substack chronicling the political climate, like Aaron Reed. There are black trans folks, like I was saying, Viandre Mitchell, our sis Hope Giselle, Dominique Morgan, you know, T.S. Madison, of course, who is the mastermind of all black trans anything on social media, so she deserves her flowers, and
Mhm.
on and on. And then there's like Translash Media, right? By the amazing Amara Jones, right? Who is an icon for her work, and building a platform that's independently led, by Black trans leadership. There's also Comfrey Films that does a lot in film production. Um, and then shout out to Trayvell Anderson, Derek Cottingham. Um, there are a lot of Black, Shar Jossel. Yeah, there are a lot of folks
So many.
holding it down, mostly independently though, because our media landscape is a mess.
It truly is. It truly is. And I'm so proud of the ones that have learned to just like, and what we learned pretty much from the pandemic, like we can get on our own platforms and use these tools to speak and tell our stories and our own stories and our own experiences of what we're going through. And so I always give my little taps to those folks because they are truly doing amazing work. And thank you for saying those names because, honey, once again, I was going to give people their flowers, and I love that. Okay, so we have the last and final question from the audience. You mentioned that you originally wrote the second half of the book first. What period of time did you first conceptualize writing the book about? And what was the moment that you decided to expand it to your earlier years?
Hmm. Yeah, the Risk It Takes to Bloom was the original title, and then it shifted when I thought I was going to do more of later in time. So in 2020, as I was conceptualizing this book, and I think my relationship to trans visibility was slightly different. I don't know, I felt that I didn't want to do a coming of identity memoir, because I felt like that had been done so much, but I think also because I had my own kind of imposter syndrome around my story being enough to share. And so I felt like, okay, well, maybe I just need to write about my coming of career and social justice commitment. It was also 2020, right? So it was a similar moment of consciousness raising and revolution. And as an activist, I think that felt important, and it was, but then I just kind of realized that I wanted more of that initial story there. Because the other part that was important was to tell the story of a Southern Black trans woman, and I had to give my roots in there for folks to understand that, because the last major work by a Black trans Southern person was The Lady Chablis Hiding My Candy, which came out in 1994,
Hmm.
her autobiography. And I realized that also during the process, and so it just felt important to give a Southern lens. Also, we started to see the ramp up of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation in 2021 and beyond. So it became even more important to talk about what most consider to be an unlikely experience. So,
Whew. There is so much to unpack in
I
this
know.
book. There's never enough time. There's never enough time. Like, oh my goodness. I'm so in awe of how you've been such a trailblazer and you continue to do such every day. And I just want you to just feel that for me. I mean, you already know that because I feel like I tell you this all the time, but I'm going to tell you this again. I thank you. We thank you for your words, for your resilience, for your power, for your love, for your commitment to pouring into community the ways that you have, pouring into yourself so then you can then pour into community in the ways that you have. It's so important. Um, like this whole conversation is giving me inspiration. Like I may have to go to Jordan J, but like, listen, we may have to have Raquel in the studio to do a one-on-one part two talk back
That
because
would be dope.
there's a lot. There's a lot. And maybe we'll get Miss Mojo and Daria and Jordan to join on the table. We'll do a whole little do too. A whole
Yeah.
I think that would be really, really fun. Um but yeah, just once again, just thank you, thank you, thank you. Do you have anything? What's coming up next for Raquel? Like before we end this out, what's next?
Um, what's next? Well, I'm excited to be a grand marshal for NYC Pride in
Oh
June.
yes,
So that's really exciting. Please check out podcasts that I host, two currently right now. Queer Chronicles, which focuses on trans youth and political battleground states, which is currently still releasing episodes. And then Afterlives, which the first season focuses on Laylene Polanco, a 27-year-old Afro-Latina who died in Rikers custody. And they're both just rich narratives. So yeah, that, and I'm getting back to writing, and I can't wait to share what I'm working on next. But also I just want to give love to you, B Hawk Snipes, for being the icon that you are, the style, inspiration, the mood board, darling, and just all around media juggernaut. So thank you.
thank you.
And I want to thank the American, let me be clear, honey, the
American.
American LGBTQ plus museum, for all the love, all the support, and all you're doing to excavate our histories, elevate our present, and of course, forecast our future.
Absolutely. I ditto. Thank you, Raquel. But before we end this, I just want to make notes that coming up in May, because this is April.
Mhm.
I'm an April baby, so it only made sense for me to host this tonight. But coming up next month in May, we have another book to talk about, The Famous Lady Lovers by Cookie Woolner, which is going to be pretty fab. I'm really excited about that. The next Lavender Literary Society program will take place on Thursday, May 30th at 6 p.m. via Zoom and will feature the author Cookie Woolner, hosted by Brontes Purnell. So make sure y'all are following the American LGBTQ Museum. Make sure you are also following Raquel Willis on all social media platforms, and me, of course, B Hawk Snipes. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Once again, give flowers where flowers are due, and take a little time to enjoy the trans view. I love us for real. Thank you, Raquel.
Thank you.
I love us. Wow. We did it, Mo. We did it. We did it.